Hi, everybody. How are you today? The chill in the air is really getting into my bones, and for the last few days, I have been suffering with my back again. Last year, I had physiotherapy for 6 months, but I have not been back since going to Canada. Right now, I'll just have to try stretching and home remedies. Anyway, my gran used to say she was grateful for every ache as it meant she was still alive. I'd also been away for 2 days because I went to fetch a friend who returned from teaching in Vietnam. Anyway, today I'm going to talk to you about Meghan's application to have Samantha's case against her dismissed. Okay, so Meghan's lawyer had finally done something and filed an application to have Samantha's case dismissed. Now, I can't tell whether they will be successful or whether Samantha even has a new lawyer yet. But based on Meghan's application, Sam's case should not be dismissed and should go ahead. But just because there are discrepancies in the filing, yes, that is what we call lies these days, does not mean that a court will decide to dismiss it or not. But we must also remind ourselves, after all, talking about the Duchess of Sussex here. And we know that whether they like her or not, she has some rather powerful elite backing her. We know, for instance, that the President of the United States' sister is backing her. Well, according to Meghan and her lawyer, Samantha's case is without merit. Unlike with Samantha's affidavit, this motion to dismiss does not have much to discuss. The submitting attorney is Ronnie Bittman of Bittman, O'Brien and Morit PLLC, based in Lake Mary, Florida, and I assume that they are just the correspondent, as the document is also again signed by Michael Klump, 808 Wilshire Boulevard, Santa Monica, California, one of Meghan's previous lawyers. So, okay, the introduction just basically gives the background, and as we all know by now, Samantha's claims are based on Meghan's email to Jason Knapp, Scobie and Durant's book Finding Freedom, and the Oprah interview. At the end of the introduction, they ask for dismissal and costs, but then they lodge into the more detailed background, and that is where we're going now. In this, the background, the first place to put the brakes on a little is almost right in the beginning, and I quote, plaintiff alleges and Meghan vehemently denies that Scobie and Durant reached out to Meghan, including through Nav. Plaintiff alleges Nav agreed to speak to the authors on background and that Meghan sent him an email with some background reminders before he did. Plaintiff alleges that the email contains 7 supposedly defamatory statements. As shown below, these statements are not defamatory. Okay, so let me read you the actual email. Hi Jason, thanks very much for the info below. For when you sit down with them, it may be helpful to have some background reminders. So I included them below just in case. I know you are better versed at this than most, but assisting where I can. Oh, how sweet of her. I appreciate your support. Please let me know if you need me to fill in any other blanks. Okay, so the plaintiff, Samantha, so far alleges everything correctly. Nav agreed to speak to Scobie and Durant, and very obviously with Meghan's knowledge and permission. And it is obviously also true that she did give him these background reminders, or otherwise known as Meghan's truth, because she said so in her own words, in writing, in the email. Okay, so back to the email. They were teenagers when they moved into her parents' home prior to Meghan being born. Doria left Thomas when Meghan was 2 years old and moved to the other side of town, 45 minutes away. His other children were 15 and 17 years old. Well, not many people have picked up on this, but according to my information and previously published information, Doria and Thomas split up in 1987 when Meghan was nearly 6, and not when she was 2 years old. I know this has nothing to do with defamation against Samantha, but it certainly refers to the truthfulness of the information Meghan gave now to give Scobie and Durant. There are sources, however, saying that Doria and Thomas did split when Meghan was 2 and only got divorced in 1987. However, but the very same sources said that after leaving Thomas, Doria took a job as an air stewardess and Thomas was left in charge of caring for their daughter. To date, no one could prove that Doria ever worked as an air hostess or stewardess. So, one can only assume that this story was false and not true. However, it is said that even when Meghan was not living with her father, she still had a bedroom in his house and spent equal time there. But back to the email. Tom Jr. and Samantha dropped out of high school the same year, now that's the same year as Doria left, and moved out of their father's home. Well, if you remember, it was Sam's first defamation claim, as she did not drop out of school. She could not attend due to an accident she had and injuries sustained as result. It was also the year when there was a kind of a preliminary diagnosis or a guess that she may have MS. I'll also gladly ask Thomas Markle Jr. whether he did leave school at 15 and his father's home at 15. And I don't know about the United States, but in my country, 15 years is still considered a child, and a child leaving home at 15 would be considered a runaway. And children up to the age of 16 are considered of compulsory school-going age. If thus true, then Mr. Markle should have been charged with abandonment and neglect, etc. Or at least he would have been in my country. The email then goes on to say that there was a 16-year age gap. Meghan saw them a handful of times when she was under 5 and only again when she was 11 years old. She didn't see her half-sister again until her father asked her to attend Sam's graduation in New Mexico when Meghan was 22 years old. Well, guys, this is not true, and even I can prove it. And here I will present you with photo evidence. The first one are two photographs of Meghan and Samantha taken at Samantha's Westwood, California apartment in 1984, when Meghan was 3. The next is of Samantha and Meghan at Vista Del Mar Avenue, Thomas's home in Los Angeles, taken in 1988, or then when Meghan was 7. As from the divorce, Meghan lived there half of the week, and from junior high to high school, she lived there full time. I also show you a photograph of Samantha, Meghan, and Wesley and Betty Gosling taken in Virginia in 1990. In other words, when Meghan was 9. Then a photograph of Meghan, Thomas, Samantha, and Thomas's sons in Woodland Hills in 1991, when Meghan was, in other words, 10. In 1992, Samantha even stayed at Thomas's Vista Del Mar home for a while before she moved into the apartment below Thomas. Now, I'm not sure how long Samantha stayed there, but as records show that Samantha and Meghan had the same address until 1998, I assume that Sam lived in the apartment until 1997 when she remarried. It is thus a complete lie that Meghan only saw Samantha a handful of times until she was 5 and only again when she was 11, as photographic evidence shows. She saw her at 7, 9, 10, 11, and from 1992, likely more often than that. Then, the other thing which baffles me, Sam says she got her degree in 2008. Meghan says she was 22 at the time. Well, my mathematical skills tell me that if she was born in 1981, she was indeed 27 in 2008 and definitely not 22. However, I must add that Samantha's graduation certificate shows May 2006, but that would still have made Meghan 25 and not 22. So far, what does this email prove, if not defamatory statements? It proves how much of a liar Meghan is, because all it contains are lies, lies, and more lies. And like I said, we hardly even touched the defamation part. However, let's go back to the email. Upon dating Harry, Samantha changed her surname back to Markle and began a career creating stories to sell to the press. Again, this is false, and the implication is indeed defamatory, as Samantha's BA certificate shows. Samantha was using her maiden name long before Meghan and Harry even met. It is there for all to see in black and white. Her degree was made out to Samantha H. Markle. Back to the email. She had lost custody of all 3 her children from different fathers. Again, this is untrue and defamatory by implication. I went and checked Samantha's records, and there was never a custody case opened against her until her daughter was about 15 or 16, and that case didn't really go anywhere, not as far as I can see. So, Samantha never, at least legally, lost custody of her children. It is also untrue and defamatory by implication, as Samantha was married twice, had two boys from her first husband, and a daughter from the second. Anyway, I'll publish the email on the screen and you can pause and read the rest of it for yourself. For now, we are going back to the motion for dismissal. Okay, now Meghan's lawyer is right. Sam did not allege that the email was forwarded to Scobie and Durant, and it likely wasn't. But the information, being false information, was shared with them, whether verbally or in a separate email from Jason. It does not matter, really, does it, my friends? The information still came from Meghan with the explicit intent for it to be shared with Scobie and Durant. Okay, so for now, I'm skipping to the argument part as it is further better explained in there. The lawyer states Californian law on defamation, whereby it must 1. Be proven that the defendant published a false statement, 2. About the plaintiff, 3. To a third party, and 4. The falsity of the statement caused injury to the plaintiff. Well, that is all 100% correct. However, unfortunately, if that is where it ended, there would have been no case and Samantha would have won. However, there is a 2-year statute for defamation, and as part of Samantha's claim is based on the email, we do indeed have a problem, as the email was written in December 2018 and the case filed in March 2022. However, and luckily, the limitation starts anew when these statements are published or republished. And Finding Freedom was published in August 2020, and Jason Knopf also provided the email for the court case between Meghan and the Mail on Sunday in 2021. Meghan's lawyer's argument is, however, that Meghan herself did not republish these statements in 2020 and 2021, but that Scobie, Durant, and Jason Knopf did. Now, technically, this is indeed true. But remember, this defamatory information would not have been there or available for publication anywhere if Meghan did not write and send that email to Jason Knopf. So, in my humble opinion, this is going to very much depend on the judge and his opinion, and perhaps even his sympathies as to whether he or she will allow this case to proceed, because it will indeed depend on the interpretation of the law. The lawyer also further harps on the technicality, namely that Meghan herself did not publish any of the statements, and this, of course, also pertains to the book. Now, when it comes to the defamation by implication, there are also indeed a few defects, and I fully understand the lawyer's argument, which he sets out clearly in an appendix, namely that there are statements in the book which were not in the email, and statements in the email which were not in the book. However, it becomes interesting again when they refer to the Oprah interview. Now, here, Meghan and her lawyer are truly grabbing at straws, saying that Meghan said she grew up as an only child and not that she was an only child. Yes, that is indeed how petty they got. However, in my opinion, neither statement is true anyway. They keep doing this when they compare. She began a career creating stories to sell to the press, to what was actually written in the book, namely, the notoriety was accompanied by cash. I guess Meghan's lawyer is not familiar with the term by implication because although the notoriety was accompanied by cash is not word for word the same as she began a career creating stories to sell to the press, the actual meaning of these two sentences, in my opinion, is exactly the same. They then proceed to argue the surname Samantha used, arguing that Samantha had used both Grant and Rasmussen after her divorce in 2003 and since. However, if I was Samantha's lawyer, I would have thrown their own argument back at them because they argue that whether Meghan saw Sam 13, 18, 19 years ago as legally irrelevant. So, then by them saying that Sam introduced herself to different people as Grant or Rasmussen or Markle should also be seen as irrelevant, as the entire world can prove via published documentation that Sam had used Markle after her divorces and long before Meghan met Harry, and thus Meghan's statement is indeed false and defamation by implication. And obviously, once again, we can prove that with her degree or the document, her diploma, showing that it was made out to Samantha H. Markle in 2006. Okay, and then they go into Florida's SLAPP law, SLAPP, but for short we call it the SLAPP law, which explains why Meghan is entitled to receive her attorney's fees and legal costs back. Now, in my opinion, just the fact that Meghan would want money from her sister is already disgusting. But let's carry on. Now, guys, I don't really know which way to go on this one. So, unfortunately, in this instance, my predictions are worth very little. However, if I read up and study the law and blah, 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 in my honest opinion, it will be 50-50 whether this case makes it to court. However, in my personal opinion, and if I'm as nitpicking as Meghan and her lawyer, I, however, agree that if Samantha's new lawyer is a sharp cookie, he or she should be able to turn Meghan's lawyer's statements around and use it against them and increase Samantha's chances of getting her day in court. So, like I said, we will have to wait and see. I certainly do not have an educated guess in this one. I do, however, hope and pray that this happens because remember, Samantha's application stated the bare minimum, the basics, in an attempt to get the case to court. But we may be very surprised at what else could potentially come out, particularly when it comes to calling witnesses. Anyway, guys, this was a long one, and I'm actually gargling on my own spittle here. So I'll leave this at that. And in my next video, we'll talk about some other interesting gossip I heard with regards to the Harkles, and we'll talk a little about the Jubilee celebrations, which had now kicked off with the Windsor Horse Show. So, until we meet again on the next one, please take good care of yourselves. Bye.